Publisher, every editor, and every newsman in the nation to re-examine his own standards and to recognize the nature of our country's peril. For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations.
Okay. As a soldier and as a general, as a retired general, we have an army of digital soldiers. What we are now, what we call, I call them, because this was an insurgency, folks. This was run like an insurgency. This was irregular warfare at its finest in politics. And that story will continue to be told here, but we have what we call citizen journalists. Okay? Because the journalists that we have in our media did a disservice to themselves, actually more than they did to this country. They did a disservice to themselves because they displayed an arrogance that is unprecedented. And so the American people decided to take over the idea of information. They took over the idea of information, and they did it through social media.
My fellow Americans.
Take the red pill.
We're at war with the most dangerous enemy that has ever faced mankind in his long climb from the swamp to the stars.
The disastrous rise of misplaced power exists.
All we have built, all we have worked for, would be destroyed.
There is nothing the political establishment will not do.
And this nation will not be fully free until all its citizens are free.
Our arms must be mighty, ready for instant action.
These criminals cannot be rewarded.
So that no potential aggressor may be tempted to risk his own destruction.
There is a point beyond which they must not advance.
They're coming after you, and I'm just standing in their way. Here I am.
You and I have a rendezvous with destiny.
The cost of freedom is always high.
Those who had the most to lose did the least to prevent its happening.
Our movement is about replacing a failed and corrupt political establishment.
Well, I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers.
This is a crusade! This is a holy war against the deep state!
We never wanted to be right, but yet things are all adding up to the firestorm.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the AlphaWarrior Show in collaboration with Josh Reed, Redpill Project. There's a man that needs no introduction that you see on the screen with us, General Michael Flynn. I can tell you right now, huge honor for me. I know it's a huge honor for my co-host tonight, Josh. Josh, how are you doing, brother?
Alpha, I'm doing well. I've been looking forward to this for a long time, having General Flynn on once again. Last week, we had Patrick Byrne, which filled in a lot of the blanks on what has been happening the last few years. And General Flynn, we just talked a few months ago prior to the election. The election has happened November 5th. Now we are at the beginning, I would say, of everything, of how this actually, the story begins. So, General Flynn, how have you been? And welcome.
Yeah, I've been great. All of us have been busy in our own ways. And, we got to where we needed to be, which is the victory circle. But once you're in that victory circle, you're now going to be attacked by everybody. Everybody's going to pat you on the back. Everybody's going to applaud and everybody's going to say, great, this is great. But where do you go from there, right? Do you go and now start to have more victories, I think. And that's to me, it's always been about making sure that people understand, your audiences, the American people, actually, even people around the world. And I have a lot of contacts around the world that have reached out to me since the election. that have applauded our efforts as Americans, applauded all those that have helped to get Donald Trump, over the end zone line there, or into the end zone. But now it's kind of like, this is where the real hard work is going to begin. We win, and Trump, I can tell you that last 60 days of his campaign going to the election was an exhausting struggle. And we got to give a lot of credit to him, physically, mentally, intellectually, spiritually, and that was after, certainly after the first assassination attempt. I don't think the second one was in the final 60 days. I think it was actually prior to that. But so this man stood the test of time, from what I kind of talk about, these great captains in history, right? I mean, you talk about the Alexanders, the Caesars, the Peters, all the different, Lincolns and Washingtons that are in our own country. Trump is in that realm of historic figures that, when people look back at this moment in history, they're going to go, they're going to say Donald J. Trump did these things. He stood up when he could have easily said, I'm going to fall back and not do this. The first time he could have done it, he could have said, I ain't running for president when he decided in 2015, but he did. He fought and he won, and all the odds were against him. We then watched 2020, and then it was like, is Trump going to run again? And Trump made another decision. I'm going to run again. I'm going to go back into the fire. I'm going to go back into, the valley of the shadow of death, which comes out of Psalm 23, which is a place that I have been and had that experience, and saw how to navigate through that valley of the shadow of death. Trump was in that valley, and he stood up for this country. He stood up for his family. He stood up for his own name too. I mean, as human beings, we're selfish. We're going to have our own egos and our own, and you don't want to be called all these names and said that you're something that personally that you are not. And I've been through that, as we were talking about prior. So we are in the victory circle right now. Trump is assembling this great team, and it is definitely, if there was a team of rivals in the beginning, sort of the first go around, and those rivals, and we can talk a little bit about that too, kind of what lessons are being learned and we are seeing now in Trump's new team. And this is only, remember, in these teams that are formed, it's not how you start the race, it's how you finish the race. Okay. Mm-hmm. So now we are in the victory circle, and now it's about executing something that is so intense, and that's called governing or governance of a nation. And in this case, it's the United States of America. And you guys know, because you've been at the sort of the forefront of this whole citizen journalism, this whole, I coined the term digital soldiers. I mean, so we have this momentum, and what we need right now is we need to keep assembling the troops. We need to keep assembling the formations. We need to keep people to understand. And there's going to be people out there that are going to look at this whole thing and go, I don't know what's happening on this and that, complain. People that complain that, like that, and you guys know with your own background in the military, we joke about complaining sometimes, right? But people that complain too much, I stay away from them. I move away from them. I'll counsel them, and I'll say, hey, look, guy or gal or whoever, you got to knock that off. What are your solutions? What are you doing to solve these problems? And if they're like, well, whine, then I move in another direction, because, or sort of navigate around them, because they're in the way. And it's not to denigrate or to hurt somebody. It's to basically say, look, we are constantly having to sacrifice time, energy, resources, everything, our lives, if necessary, to keep something that is so sacred. If you have an understanding like I have, and I've trained myself, to understand that through my own education, my own military experiences, my life, to train myself to be and to know and to understand, what is it that's, what are these environmental conditions that are around us, and then how I work them, how, I say, I can be very public, which I am on social media, and I've been, I have a high profile, and and I try to use it smartly and in a disciplined way. But I get the ass sometimes. But I also have a very effective way to work behind the scenes, and because I have a great network of people who trust me, who know if I come to them and I say, you need to start thinking about this, you need to go talk to this group, or you need to focus on these issues. These are key, because those are experiences that I have had through my own persecution or through my own military experiences. You don't, like I tell people, and not to pat myself on the back, but you don't get to the level that I got to because you're kissing somebody's rear end, or fairy dust is sprinkled on you, and
Right.
poof, you're there. And you work hard, and you get into these. You're willing to take risks, and you're willing to demonstrate that that you have a certain set of skills and capabilities. And somebody suddenly goes, "Yep, we need you here." And I'm one of these kids. When I was a kid growing up, playing. I remember. I was talking about this. I went to a Catholic school for early on in elementary school. We used to play in this, flag football league at this baseball park, and at that time, I was talking third grade, fourth grade. I don't know how old you are then, 8, 9, and I was one of these kids even then where it's like, okay, we're going to pick sides. I'd be right out there because I grew up in a family of 9. Everybody was kicking, we were all beating each other up all the time, having fun. And, we would fight internally all the time. My father was a very competitive guy, a very good athlete. And he raised us all to be that way. So I was one of those kids early on where I'd be like, I'd step out and I go, okay, I'll be the captain for the red team, right? And so you start picking sides, right? And I was always in that kind of a position all throughout my life where I was like, when nobody was going to step up to say, I'll do it, I would do it. I would step up to do it because I knew that I needed it. I knew that I could take that challenge on, and I wanted that challenge. And now we are in the execution mode, and we have so much at stake. And maybe we can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, the first, you just talked about how you coined the term digital soldiers, and I think that you just posted this on your X the other day, the speech from the YAF.org speech that you gave. In there, you said something that really sparked the minds of a lot of people during that time. You said this was irregular warfare at its finest. This is political irregular warfare. This was an insurgency, folks. It was ran like that. So with that being said, does the mindset of someone like you who has 38 years experience in the United States military in counterinsurgency and intelligence, does that mean that you begin this process of formulating how to operate a counterinsurgency in kind of this perspective?
Yeah. So you take, and so first of all, that particular speech that I gave was about 3 days after the 2016 victory, and totally off the cuff. So I got up there and I was talking to 500 young people at the Trump Hotel in Washington, D.C. at the time. And I wasn't exactly sure what I was going to even talk about. And so as I was walking up, to the dais or the podium, I'm trying to think, what am I going to talk about? And that's what came to me. Okay. So that just to give people some idea who pay attention to that, because I did repost it the other day because the mainstream media, was the CEO of Axios that I reposted it on, is whining about, all the ways that journalism has been affected. It's because they've been lying and deceiving the American people for so long. So there is this rise. But this idea about, so first of all, I am a irregular thinker, okay? I can think conventionally and I can operate conventionally and I can strategize conventionally and I can look at conventional foes, right? I can look at a battlefield and look at the forces arrayed on our side, the forces arrayed on the other side, from a conventional mindset. And in fact, my first, I don't know, probably 10 years of my military career, all the training I went through, we were still fighting the former Soviet Union. So we were trained on fighting on the plains of Europe, right? The conventional mindset. But I started out in a very good unit, the 82nd Airborne Division, an excellent unit. And during that time, when I was a young officer, I started to really, we had coming out of the throes of a Vietnam War. I had many of my non-commissioned officers were Vietnam veterans, great guys and great teachers for me. And we changed our doctrine at the time to low intensity conflict. Now it's, Boone Cutler and I just wrote a book on 5th generation warfare just to kind of bring it, full circle. And so during that time in my early days, even though I'm like studying this conventional mindset, the plains of Europe, I'm in a unit and Central America was starting to kick in. We had operations where the Cubans and and other nations were starting to infiltrate into the Caribbean. We had the Mariel boat lift that came over from Cuba at the time into the shores of Florida, and we started to, in that unit, in fact, the unit that I was in, the platoon that I led, we started to be tasked, because we were a very good platoon. We started to get tasked to go to places like Central America. We started to get tasked to go to places like the Caribbean. And we were, and some of it was combat operations. Some of it was quasi-combat operations, I'd call it, right? Central America was sort of a quasi-combat operations area. So I'm kind of giving you this background because that's where I was very effective at that kind of stuff. And I really began to form my ideas about how to fight in a different way. You can take those different irregular concepts, unconventional concepts, hybrid concepts, and you can apply them to conventional war. There's always been irregularities within, even on the conventional battlefield, right? I mean, it's the OSS of World War II is a really, the sort of the famous history of the OSS and how they operated behind the lines, all that kind of stuff. So as I go forward, and I talked about that particular thing, that campaign that Donald Trump ran from 2015 till the victory on, I think it was 8 November then, 2016. Yeah, I mean, the kinds of conversations that we had, the types of data that we were collecting, the types of influences that he was allowing us to leverage down into places that nobody ever went to talk to people or to find out about people. So when you're talking about precincts, right? Precincts is like on the battlefield, on an irregular battlefield, a precinct is like the local community, right? And so if you don't engage the local community, then they're going to kind of go, well, you're the enemy, right? They're just going to look at you like you're the foe. And so we were doing at that time, we were engaging local communities around the country that felt left out. And I use the phrase, Trump was really giving a voice to the voiceless, right? So that resonated. His message resonated. His bumper sticker of "Make America Great Again" resonated. All these things. And I started to really, I firmly believe that from the moment we met, but that this guy is of such historic consequence. And that's why to this day, he and I, we've had our differences in time, and I could sit there and go, well, he let me go. But I understood at that moment, because, and I don't know if you guys have seen my film, because I talk a little bit about this, at that moment, it's like the command sergeant major or the senior master chief of a unit and the commander, and you're a troop, you're a sailor, or you're a soldier, or you're a Marine. You don't get in between those two. And for me, it was, I'm a guy who understood my role and my position, and frankly, what was happening. And I couldn't get between the president and the vice president of the United States. They are elected, right? And so fast forward, and everybody kind of sees what type of person a Mike Pence is, and Mike Pence has turned out to be. Again, irregular thinking, irregular warfare. So now it's like, I'm not going to sit there and fall back on my ass and go, oh, okay, woe is me. Now it's like, okay, how do we function? How did we get to where we needed to be this last election? Now Trump, gets all the credit because he put himself out there. And look at what we've just learned. This craziness about Jack Smith, who should be criminally prosecuted, dropping all the charges, right? All these other things that have happened since Trump won. It just shows you how political all of it is, and how criminal these people are to have dragged this country through everything that they've dragged us through, starting with Russiagate. You're hearing from enemy number one as far as the deep state went, And there are still elements within our system that are both in the government and outside the government that still attack me because I'm not a guy to go back into the government. I'm frankly, I'm not somebody who's going to go back in and sort of, work as an assistant to an assistant. I'm just not that style. That's not my design. And that's okay. I mean, I'm fine with that. I like the fact that we are where we are right now. We got here because of irregular thinking. And the irregular thinking is where guys like you and I and others who are out there in this sort of, this circle that we have created and it has expanded, we have a good, what I call fingertip feel for the operational environment, which is the American sentiment. The sentiment of the American people has gotten to the point where enough is enough because we have gotten down into the grassroots, right? And for me, that's where I wanted to operate. I wanted to operate at the grassroots level. I use this phrase, local action, national impact. That's a grassroots. It's kind of like get into the people. I've been around this country in the last 4 years, starting really, really starting right after, Biden took office, I guess, in 2021. I've probably been to easily 200, 250, cities and towns for different purposes, speaking engagements, showing my film, Reawaken America tour, veterans events. And my message has been very, very consistent. And the big message is we now have an opportunity and really a commitment, and it's an honor to do it, to fight for this country. But it has to be everybody. It's not just those of us that served and we know how to serve because we've served in the military. It's like every American citizen. People come up to me all the time and say to me, thank you for your service. I just flew back from Austin, Texas last night. I was with Alex on his show and Owen Schroyer on his show. And one of these days, I want to get into, I'd like to be in the studios with you guys, because then it's a different vibe, right? But, and people come up to me all the time, wherever I'm at, and they come up and they say, hey, are you General Flynn? Thank you for your service. And I always grab and give them a big hug. And I tell them, look, I appreciate that. It's humbling. So, whatever they're doing, like I had a crossing guard at an airport, in Austin airport, stopping like 100 people. And I'm walking across the street with all these people, and gal, African-American gal, she's got her reflector vest on, her little stop sign, a whistle. She puts her thing down and she goes, are you who I think I am? And I said, who do you think I am? Right. And she said that. And then she proceeded to give me a big hug. I mean, this is a crossing guard, in Austin, Texas, stopping cars as people are crossing to get into the airport. And I started to talk to her right there. And I said, what you're doing right now is so important. She's serving, right? She's serving at that where she's at. But the fact that she recognized me and we had that connection, to me, that's local action at its most powerful. And that's a moment those are the moments that I have really, where I feel like I've been blessed, because I know that people realize the fight that we have been in to save this country. I mean, I could see the relief in this woman's eyes. Like she was like breathing a different air, and because Donald Trump is back in the victory circle. But now, guys, it's execution time. We have to execute. And this is where I will continue to play a role. I'm engaged with different people. At this point, I think because I am a controversial figure, and I understand that, and because it could be. I mean, you think Matt Gaetz was,
Right.
Believe me, if Donald Trump said I'm going to bring Mike Flynn in to be the Secretary of Defense, I mean, maybe it would have been a good thing, but Washington D.C. might have imploded, right?
Yeah, I agree.
So there's things that I will do, and I have let the right folks know, and I will continue to do that. This is a long battle. Like I said in a post the day after, and I'll shut up here. The day after the election, I posted, because I started thinking about like everything. Back to your great question, Josh. I started thinking about where we are from from a sort of a fifth generation warfare perspective, because that's kind of how my mind thinks. And I wrote down like the metaphor of the D-Day invasion. Okay. So we attacked on D-Day, and by D-Day +1, we finally got up into, you drop the 82nd Airborne, you drop in the 101st, you get to, the British para got up there in the hills. They started to, take objectives. Guys literally climbing the mountains, climbing the cliffs of Normandy beaches. By D-Day +1, we had gotten a foothold. Okay, back onto in this case, the metaphor, it's like the continent of America. So you guys, me, and those digital soldiers, those many digital soldiers that are out there, with the chaos and the complexity and the uncertainty, we have established a foothold. Now, I wouldn't say that we're at D+2 yet. I wouldn't say there. Now we've broken through the hedgerows, and we are now, maybe we're heading towards the Battle of the Bulge, but even that, you can't declare victory over Europe yet. So we can't declare victory until we have a period of time. And that started the day that Trump, so it started on the election day when he declared victory, right? So it starts there, and that period of time could be 10, 15, maybe 20 more years of continuing to fight. We called it the Reawaken America Tour, which we started in March of 2021. When everybody was like in the throes of, oh my God, what just happened? Our election was still, and we were like, no, I'm not gonna fall for this. We're gonna fight. And so now so what's the next iteration of something like that, right? And the way I metaphorically, or the way I call it, is if that was the Reawaken America celebration, and we were able to achieve, at least from our point of view, a level of success. Now what I want the Stay Awake America celebration. So it's like, America, and to your audience and to all the people that listen to this on clips or whatever, we have got to stay awake. We have a responsibility to the men and women who gave their lives for this country, whether they did it in battle or whether they did it in some other capacity, like all these, 4J6ers who are still being persecuted by these assholes, excuse my Irish, in our weaponized government. And that those people are sacrificing on our behalf right now, and they did nothing. And I bring that out because, we need to make sure that we recover some of these people that have given up everything, and all they wanted to do is to just save our country. All they wanted to do was the right thing. They wanted to stand there and speak freely about what they felt was wrong, right? To petition the government, which is in the First Amendment. So anyway, all that said, to your question about the digital soldiers and in that particular presentation, for those that listen and those that really pay attention to things that I say and things that I do and things that I write, my mind works in a different way, and it's because I'm trained this way. If I was a conventional guy, then I wouldn't, honestly, I don't think I'd have been as successful as I was, certainly in the military, and frankly, even in politics, something I never wanted to get involved in, but I did because it was like, it's like I just felt compelled that the direction of our country was going in the wrong direction. And I was like, I felt like maybe there's something I can do. Maybe I can help. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'll say, General, you said in an interview, I think it was the one you did with AJ too, to go to your way of thinking being irregular, that you have to be able to put yourself in the boots of our adversaries to understand that. And I think, most people are not capable of doing that, let alone capable of even understanding how far our adversaries will go and what they'll do, because most people are good people. So they just can't understand the thresholds of evil that exist out there. In your book, and you mentioned it earlier, right here, Fifth Generation Warfare, in section 3.3, I bookmarked it. There's something, and it caught my attention. I bring it up a lot of times, and it says how to make people kill people. So, very powerful heading there. But there was 4 phases, and phase 1 was polarization. Phase 2 was tribalization, then dehumanization, and then killing, the final step in that. when you look at what's kind of going on, and we know the deep state's never just going to throw their hands up and say, all right, you got us, we quit.
Right.
And I mean, everything's been so contentious. You have the stuff with Russia, Ukraine, with Israel and Gaza. And regardless of what people's positions are, where they stand, you saw, or at least I witnessed, and I'm sure you gentlemen witnessed it, people were posting all these just gory images, and it just became a normal thing that you saw on your feed. And I saw that as, man, there is a dehumanization that's taking place here, to where you can see just the mutilations of whatever side sees it as innocent. Are we closer to this phase 4 if the deep state gets the way they want than we realize when you look at this? Because I really appreciate what you're saying, General, because, you know, like I said, I did the gang stuff and detectives and undercover work. So I can go into another city and be like, there's something going on right here. And then the picture, I can see it. So I imagine you see that on like a national, global scale. What does it look like to you when you see these events in the world going on right now?
Yeah, well, you know, those first two elements, the polarization and the tribalization, those are actually easy to achieve. You know, you polarize by messaging, you polarize by name calling, you polarize by, and, you know, you use the tools of the media, you use the tools of television, you know, in Hollywood, you use the tools of the intelligence community that has extraordinary power and an ability to be able to polarize, you know, segments of society. And there's clear tribes out there, right? The tribalization is easy. You can pick out your tribes just by, hell, you know this, Alpha, from your working in various communities and working in, particularly if you worked undercover or detective stuff, you know, you know where to go, right? The dehumanization component, we on the battlefield, I can tell you, in many of the battlefields I've been on, we would work to dehumanize the enemy to the point where we did not want the locals to, and whether it was in Central America with the Sandinistas or the Somoza regime, or other communist regimes, you know, the Cubanos and, you know, Castro. We wanted to dehumanize these people to make them appear just pure evil. And you know, now those are in the days when we had kind of a over there foe and then America, right? But now it's right here at home. And we've seen this, you know, all what Donald Trump did was he came in at a time when if he didn't, we'd be in big trouble here. But he came in at a time because I don't think he like, I don't think he like saw or knew, like, you know, wasn't trained like I'm thinking right now, but he just instinctively knew that there was bad things happening to this country and that now's my time. Thank God he made that decision, because, you know, to dehumanize an enemy, like, for example, and I, you know, because I've been called all kinds of different things for this war in Ukraine. So what for years, what they've done, and they've done that, they actually goes back to the Cold War. You have to demonize an opponent to the point where they are just an evil entity. And, you know, if somebody says Russia, then, you know, then Russia's bad, right? Russia's an evil like they call us, like the Iranians call us the evil empire. I mean, you know, George Bush called people out for the evil empire, right? The evil empire. I mean, that's actually President George W. Bush, you know, is the one that used that term. So that's to dehumanize an opponent. And you're right. My entire life in the military was to take my feet and put them into the boots of our enemies, whether I was in a battalion, you know, doing battalion intelligence operations, or at the Army level, or at a joint level, or at an international level, where I had to look at the playing field. And it's like being on a football team, right? Or soccer's probably a better analogy for those that played soccer, because there's somebody on a soccer field that's called a striker, and a striker has to be able to see the whole field, and a striker can operate anywhere on the soccer field. A striker can go from one end of the field to the other. Whereas in football, you kind of have your lanes, and you stay in your lanes, and you block and tackle, or you play the deep, or you're a tight end. You know, you do different things. And it's more conventional. The striker on a soccer field is not. He's very unconventional. I'm a striker, and I was a very effective striker, to be able to understand not only ourselves, but the environment that we were on, and then of course the enemy. And the enemy was always somebody that I had to study, and I mean study, like go back in there. I would study their history. I would study their culture. I would study the geography. I would study their weapon systems. I would study their tactics. I would study their leaders, all the different things. So when we talk about dehumanizing, when for the regular American that's out there, you know, and people in the various audiences that I know are very loyal to you guys, and also just folks that are out there. I mean, you know, this was my life, right? This is what I did. You know, you guys have your own experiences that you have been involved in, and you just mentioned, like, you know, in a city or in a part of a city, a municipality, wherever. I mean, my thing was to look at the world, and then when I was getting out of the military, and all of a sudden I got grabbed up by this sort of the political machinery, because I felt like, in this case, Trump was the guy that was going to be this figure. And I didn't quite understand it at the time. I knew at the time that this guy can be the next president, and then he was. But I think from the perspective of what I learned, and we were talking about the word discernment earlier, what I discerned over time is that that our system, the people in our government, it is actually much worse than anybody realized.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's bad. It's really, really bad. You know, we're seeing it play out on sort of live these days, because you cannot hide from the truth. You cannot keep a secret anymore. Right? There's no more, you know, classified. And it's classified. It's under investigation. Bullshit. People are going to go do their own. Digital soldiers out there that are aggressive and smart and listening and paying attention. They're out there fighting, you know, an enemy, and the enemy is anybody that is trying to hide the truth, right? And so I think that this idea of dehumanizing is so pervasive within our, you know, we talk about weaponization, right? And in the book, actually, we talk about weaponizing, but we talk about, you know, the weaponization of government, weaponization of the intelligence community, weaponization of the justice system. So they weaponize it, and they target individuals, and they target entire groups of people to dehumanize. Okay, they understand the tribes. They know the components of that, and then they begin to dehumanize. And when they focus on somebody to dehumanize them, like they did to me, I mean, 2 years in a row, my name was the most Googled name on the planet. Okay, and during that period of time, if somebody said, Mike Flynn, what's this guy, and then you Googled me, right? You put me in your internet search, it's going to say committed treason, you know, traitor, convicted felon, you know, Putin puppet, all these names for 2 years. So, I know that there are people still out there that's all they know. That's all they heard, because they were driven, you know, they were being driven to me because in this case, the enemy wanted to dehumanize me. Same with Trump and his family. And so they worked on that, because the next phase, the final phase, and, you know, and killing is it's a metaphoric term. It's also a very real term, you know. And as a reminder, and I think Matt Gaetz, you know, just had a video the other day, which I thought was really good. And this is after Matt stepped down, and I've been saying this for a long time, but certainly after this victory, you know, I want to remind people that had Trump not won, he'd be going to jail, going to prison for the rest of his life on the 26th of November. Okay, I don't know what today's date is. It's like I don't know, 20.
Today is the 26th.
Okay, 26. Sorry, there you go. So today's the 26th. So today, had Trump not won, he'd be in courtroom today, and that Judge Marchant would have convicted him. I mean, look at what what this crazy judge has decided to do. He's going to kick the can until after Trump comes out of the White House. I mean, right? I mean, this is what they're talking about. So these people are not going to give up. They're going to adapt. They are going to change. They are going to have options. And we call them in the military, we call them branches and sequels, right? And to the plan, right? You develop a plan. If it doesn't, you know, that first shot fired doesn't work out, you have a branch to go this way, or you have a sequel that's a follow-on phase to that, right? These people think like that. One of the, you know, you guys know this, you know, the phrase, the enemy has a vote. So don't discount what the enemy is constantly thinking. And if you don't consider what the enemy is thinking, then you're going to fall, and you're going to fall for the tribalization. You're going to fall for the dehumanization, and you're going to fall for, those that they metaphorically kill. Okay. I mean, but I did say, like, I put a strong message out there earlier today. And one of the things is that I put in there is that there have been people that have died. Okay. Ashley Babbitt.
Yep.
Okay. She's a casualty of this war. Right. And there are people in the J6 community. I think the number is like 5 that have committed suicide. Right. And there are others. The young kid that was the DNC, he was more than an intern back in the summer of 2016 that was killed, right? That died.
Seth Rich.
Seth Rich.
Yeah.
Seth Rich. I'm sorry. So, like, there's physical casualties actually that, and the crazies in the mainstream media, the woke corporate left loonies. They'll take a comment like that and they'll go, Flynn's out there saying that, we're killing people. People actually died, right? I mean, those aren't conspiracy theories. Those are factual things. And you can look at that aspect and say, well, is that a component of what we're talking about? And to a degree it is, because if you're really working hard on these things and you're moving towards dehumanizing your opponent to cause them to basically die away. It doesn't mean that they physically die, although, 2 times Trump, the assassination of Trump, had for like centimeters, his head would be red mist. Okay. So, were it not for, frankly, a miracle. I mean, a miracle. So,
yeah.
But then it happened again. And that's why I say, like, he's got to be my number one priority for Donald J. Trump right now is his safety. And to, he says he's been given more resources, which he has, but there's still even that. I'm concerned for his safety, and he knows that. But in addition to all the other things that he's trying to do, that's why we put that component into that book, Alpha, because there's a harsh reality of life out there when you're dealing with ideological competition. Okay, and not everybody likes capitalism. Not everybody likes free speech. Not everybody likes our Constitution. Not everybody likes our Bill of Rights. And those not everybody's are in our government. Okay, they are inside of our government. And had Trump not been able to sit in that victory circle for a short time, which he is right now, then we would be in a completely different place. I'm telling you, everybody knows it.
So, General Flynn, I mean, talking about what Alpha was just talking about, and you were just talking about, the aspect of dehumanization, this also has kind of a metaphoric aspect to it. What they did to you, what they did to Donald Trump, what they've done to so many others. The dehumanization aspect is also the relaying, saying that you're a Russian spy or Donald Trump is in collusion with Russia. It's taken away that nationalistic pride. It's pulling people away from that cultural center of that person, removing them from their tribe in a sense. And then the killing is the character assassination, which they utilize to go in there right after that fact and try to assassinate them through the social and cultural movements, through the media, through the information warfare. And it's interesting to watch because that's what we saw with you and Trump and a lot of other people over the years. And then with Trump, they came to the final toll to where it wasn't working. It wouldn't work anymore. They knew their cases had no precedent. So they had to actually go in for the shot heard around the world. They had to go in for the real shot. They took it once, and I think they set it up the second time, and it failed miserably because by August timeframe, when the second one happened, I think we started seeing a lot of destabilization within the deep state infrastructure, a lot of distrust, probably a lot of people pulling away. We saw capitulation in July with Silicon Valley, Wall Street towards Donald Trump. And so their infrastructure started to falling apart, which I think was a great thing because that obviously triumphed us to this victory that we're in now. But it's also an injured animal that has its back against the wall. And so let's transition into that part. We have an injured animal that's back against the wall. What are your thoughts?
Yeah. So, and great comments and questions from you guys. I think that, and I talk about this in my film too, we have moved from physical assassination of a president of the United States of America, right? And I think we're going to learn a lot more. And what we are going to learn when that, if all that information gets released, we're going to learn what we've always kind of known, right? I mean, it's not going to be, actually, it's not going to be a surprise, and the American people can handle it, right? But we've moved from a physical assassination of a sitting president of the United States to a narrative, a time where the narrative assassination now kicks in, right? I mean, the personal attacks, the dehumanization of an individual to the point where it feels so relentless. And, and for a while, a lot of people believed it. A lot of people during the 4 years of Donald Trump's first presidency, and even into, frankly, the last couple of years, there's still a segment of society, the tribalization, that still believes this narrative, because, it's basically repeat. Doesn't make any difference if it's a lie. As long as you keep repeating it, people begin to believe it. And enough people will believe it. And they felt like, well, if enough people believe it, then we can actually overcome that. We can win. We can now continue to play this game of fair elections, pretend elections, and we can beat them. I personally think, because you mentioned that, the shift of people, the shift of some of the tribes. I mean, Bobby Kennedy is a great example of a person, a human being in history that put country before self. Okay, and because he realized what was happening, and I've talked to him about this specifically, and I spoke with him one time not too long ago before the election, where I said, you whatever you think, you're going to go down in history, because I said we're going to win, and it's because it's a big reason is because of what the decision that you just made to put country before yourself. He could have continued with whatever his ego is, and he doesn't have one from what I can tell, and just fought as an independent and lost and probably would have hurt Trump's chances, but he didn't. He saw the writing on the wall, and he realized, as he has said, the Democratic Party, they left the station a long time ago. That does not exist in our country any longer. We have a socialist element, frankly, communism in our country that is so pervasive right now. And then we have the rest of America. And so as we go forward, we have to understand that they are not done. This narrative assassination of human beings, of people, because to do a physical assassination these days, there's too many capabilities that we have. There's too many of these things, right? Of these phones that are around. There's too many cameras. There's too many. Everybody is switched on. What you guys are doing with your audiences and your shows and your networks of people that you have, and the kind of influence that you guys have, we've got to make this explode. And yes, and thank God for Elon Musk for doing what he did with X, because that's another. It's a weapon system. It is it is like a nuclear bomb of weapon systems in the world of information and the world of narration, in the world of storytelling, and to be able to get our message out. Had we not had that, I'd still be censored off of Twitter, which I was, censored off of it after the 6th of January. In fact, the 8th of January, the same day that Trump got booted off, I got booted off, and I didn't come back on until Elon came to fro. And I think people like Elon, also a very historic figure. I think, because a lot of people have said, some snarky things about him, but I actually think that because of his family situation, I think that he's had his family members, particularly children, affected by some of the madness that he probably once bought into, right? And he sees it too. So when it begins to affect you personally, then you take on and you take some responsibility, and you say, I'm not going to allow this to happen anymore. Well, what was happening? See, and I won't speak for you guys. I'll speak for myself. But I didn't need to be affected personally. What I needed, and what I felt, and that's why I served this country the way I did. And I was born on an army base. I don't know. I have known nothing but the military my whole life. So my old man's a World War II Korea vet, sergeant, retired, good guy, deceased now. But so my life was always about this country. and I love my family. You know, I'm a Catholic kid, was raised a Catholic kid, but it was always about service. And I just have this, intuition inside of me, this drive, this DNA, whatever, that always looked at, okay, who are the enemies of America? That's what I trained myself to do. And the enemies of America are right here in America.
Yeah.
Okay. And so that's what everybody now realizes. This country, and it ain't a divided country. It's not a 50 this side, 50 that side. There's like 90% of Americans. They know exactly what we're talking about right now. Many of them don't want to say nothing. Like a lot of them came up to me and said, man, I'm going to vote for Trump, but I can't say nothing because I'll get fired. Right. Well, a lot of those people went out and voted for him. And I'm glad that they did. And they're still in these jobs where they can't say nothing, but Trump's going to be the guy. Right. And so anyway, there's so much to that, but the sentiment of the American people driven by, citizen journalism, driven by the influencers out there, driven by people like yourselves, and all of us who have some level of influence, we have got to be careful with how we use that and how we move the mindset. We got to really be careful because there's a bunch of idiots out there, and I mean, I was back and forth on this text thread that I'm on, this morning about some guys that are they attack me for all kinds of weird shit, and I'm like, okay,
we know.
To me, I can, the way my mind works, I can put that, I can segment that and keep moving forward, always forward, always forward. And when you have that kind of a mindset, the Chihuahuas, there's a phrase that I learned way back by this, great general long time ago. He said, don't let the Chihuahuas tree you, right? Meaning, the little, alligators or whatever that, you don't want to get treed by these little snapping dogs. You just want to take the dog by the scruff. And I love dogs, I love pets, but what I'm saying? And just go, okay, out of here, don't let those voices, meaningless, deceivers, don't let that bother you. And I don't. And I'm human at the end of the day. I have family, I have a large family, and my wife has a large family. And, they see these things and they get upset by them. I don't. I'm a very focused individual. And my focus right now for the foreseeable future is to continue to help this man that has decided to put his entire life on the line for this country. And historically, I think Donald J. Trump, like I say, in the annals of world history, with all of the great captains that we still study and we talk about, despite how they have tried to dehumanize this man, he is going to stand up and above and be one of those central figures. And if I have a small component of that, to be able to help this country, I'm going to continue to do it.
I'll say this, General. One, you have plenty of men and women who love this country, understand your role, and the same way they've defended Trump, are making sure that your name is not continue to be dehumanized to allow you to not worry about the Chihuahuas, so you can focus on the more important role that we know that you serve right now, and not worry about the smaller distractions. I was very lucky in my career, to get into, boxing, amateur boxing for the police league. And I was lucky enough to be trained by a coach, Joel Diaz. He's trained world champion boxers. And some advice he gave me, we're talking about a fight. He's like, who won that fight? I'm like, well, he goes, are you sure? He goes, watch the fight with no volume and then tell me what you think. And so I go and I watch it and I'm like, it clicked. The light bulb went off. And it's funny how God puts these learning lessons in your life that end up, I kind of identifying to you why you're going to need them later. And when I look at everything that's going on now, it's like, let me mute what the world's telling me and look at what's going on. And then what conclusions do I come to? And if those conclusions are different from what I'm being told, then why? What's the motive? And two questions I'll give them to you. So, something I found interesting, because I pay attention to stuff, is you came out with 5th generation warfare, he came out with the artificial intelligence, and then it was the role of the church. And when I look back at the deployment of these books, you know, especially around information warfare, we heard the term, and if you're really deep into studying what was going on, you're familiar with it, but it wasn't really like a mainstream word just yet. And I noticed shortly after that book, it was very mainstream, but didn't catch my attention yet. But then artificial intelligence, yeah, you and Boone came out with that one. And I noticed shortly after that, this like, it almost seems like it was this accelerated push of artificial intelligence that was out there. All of a sudden, you know, you got ChatGPT and Grok and all these things. So when I realized, I was just like, you know, General and Boone have the eye to see what's coming into our future, and they're educating us to be able to be weaponized against these things when we see it. So then when the role of the church came out, I said, okay, if the pattern is consistent here, this kind of worries me on how they'll weaponize this, because I've always looked at, you know, our world is governed by these politics and these leaderships. And I think as humanity awakens and realizes, hey, you know, we're really being governed by our consent, and how powerful, you know, how much power do we have if we pull that back? And as government's exposing its corruption, well, then it creates this vacuum of power. But then you look back, you know, the way it used to be, you know, hundreds of years ago, the churches were in control. And I'm like, are the churches set up to fill this vacuum of power in government if they ever lose it? And then how do we maneuver that? And so I say all that to say this, General. The Army released some videos that have been very popular, very cool. Ghost in the Machine 2. Yep. But in those videos, it talks about we are everywhere. We are everyone. And so as I mute the world of what's going on, and this understanding that our military is out there, you know, how widespread is it in your opinion, or maybe even your knowledge, of them being everywhere? The media, podcasting, so, you know, spaces as influencers, you know, how much is not real of what the public sees is the first question. The second one is, I would imagine that if we're deploying that, it's because we're countering something that the bad guys are doing to have the same effect, but for a nefarious reason. How big is this war that's in the shadows that's going on that your normal American just probably doesn't grasp?
Yeah, it's so the answer to the second question, it's huge, and there is a constant shadows war going on. And remember, the sort of the fourth branch of government is the intelligence community, led by, you know, principally the CIA, and they're a global organization that has gotten so far out of control, and controlled by a group of elites, and so it's dangerous to our way of life, right? To a citizen's republic, right? To a constitutional republic. So the you know, Boone is trained as a psychological operations guy, and he has experience doing it. I'm trained in the world of intelligence and information, and to a degree psychological operations, but certainly intelligence. And intelligence has a range of subtexts, subsets. And when we were sitting down talking about the future, we wanted to build a foundation for people to understand. So the first foundational principle is to understand the greater concept of where we are in terms of warfare, because life is a big war. It's one struggle, right? It is one struggle. I mean, you can metaphorically talk about all these different levels of warfare, but life is war. It's a constant sacrifice. You're fighting, you know, to do all the kinds of things that you want to be able to do. But we had to have the foundation. And then as we saw the advent, and, you know, part of my training is electronic warfare and cyber. I have a master's degree. One of my master's degrees, I have 3 of them. One of them is in telecommunications, and I did that way back. And so I have a very sophisticated level of understanding of signals intelligence, cyber, electronic warfare, electronic countermeasures, electronic support measures, and all the communications applications that come with that. So that goes way back. That goes back in, I was in the 1980s, doing a lot of stuff, lower level, tactical level, but I studied it. And then I started to think about, like drones, right? Drone warfare. I was involved in drones as a young officer in the 80s. I used them when I was in the 25th Infantry Division, little handheld, throw the thing up in the air, have a little camera. So I'm using these toys, if you will, and these applications, these weapon system tools that we would have in the military. And I was one of these, like, again, if people listen to me enough, they'll go, man, that guy's got, my way of thinking is very different. It's very irregular. And it's like to don't think conventionally, but think, how do you apply things that are about to be, right? Mm-hmm. And so artificial intelligence was the second iteration. And then when one of the things that I never thought I was going to get in Alpha was any of this, because there's a phrase that my father taught me when I was a kid: the older I get, the smarter my father becomes. And it's a great phrase. And one of the things that I've always kind of been very intimate about is my own faith. I'm not one to go around and, military that, you get as an officer, sometimes you get invited to somebody's Bible study at their house. And if you didn't show up, then, the colonel didn't like you or something like that. I never went because that wasn't me. Right. And, it'd be a bunch of people, and they're doing, good things, and that's fine. But it was very intimate to me. But now it's not. Now it is about faith. It is about a spiritual component of our lives in this country. And so the role of the church. Now, we're not in there telling people how to what their faith should be. We're in there talking in that book. It's like another level of understanding about what is the role. And it really does come back to the beginning of where our country was founded and what we are all about. And this idea, this notion that this country is built on a set of bricks, like bricks, right? And that's why we basically wrote that series. And, the crazy thing is it's probably the first book that anybody will buy. At the end of every chapter is an exam, right? Mm-hmm. And because I want people I have to read things over and over. I got to write notes down to let it sink in, comprehension. And I wanted people to read these things and then comprehend what it was that we were saying. Because if we don't understand those things, because I can tell you, I became part of something called the Remnant Alliance. Remnant Alliance. It's about 500 churches around this country. About 100 of them are Hispanic churches. Okay. And I became part of this like way back in like 2021, early part of 2021. And it grew and grew and grew. And it was through an organization called Citizens Defending Freedom. A good friend of mine is the guy that organized it. Very, very a great leader, a great businessman, former Navy guy. And he really wanted to invest his time, and he wanted to sacrifice what he was doing for the betterment of this country. And he had an idea about that. And it developed into this thing they call the Remnant Alliance. Well, it's not just about the leaders of churches. It's about who in the congregation wants to lead, right? Mm-hmm. And so this is another important aspect of where our country must go. And all of it. So all that said, and from your question, it all to me circles back to local action. We have to stitch this country back together at the local level. That's where the proverbial rubber meets the road, right? And we have to let, thank God, we got to let a guy like Trump, all these people and all these picks that he's got, the cabinet, the team that those are just the faces right now. Below them are going to be structured organizations, and there's going to be challenges, and there's going to be all kinds of execution. The plan, is fine, but execution is really where it matters. So we are going to have to get behind him and push and keep our voices out there. But at the same time, I want every single person that listens to this right now, I want every single person to think about, how do you serve your communities wherever you're at? And the way that you can do that by getting involved and accepting a little bit of risk. Now, maybe you don't want to do that, but you see somebody else in your community who is a leader, and you can encourage them, or you can go work for them. Go knock on their door and say, hey, I see what you're trying to do. I'm not that way. I can't do this, or I can't, don't worry about what you can't do. Think about the things that you can do, and get behind those people that are willing to put their necks out there at the local level. That's how this country was formed, at the very beginning, and that's how this country will stay as a great, as the great nation that it is. But every day will require a little bit of sacrifice from every single one of us.
And that's pretty brilliant too, because you're right. I mean, I'm a historian when it comes to the Constitution. I love the founding aspects of our country, and that the community centers revolved around the church. This is how people began to communicate. This is where the moral and ethical fabric within the household actually was extended from. And that's one of the things that we've lost in this country since the 40s and the 50s and the cultural revolutions that have happened. We've lost that moral and ethical fabric, and that the reestablishment back within those community centers, the religious and spiritual institutions, brings that back into the household, which then I've always said, General Flynn, it's the household that builds the community. It's the community that builds the city. It's the city that builds the state, and it's a state that builds the country. And that the representation in Washington, D.C. right now is a reflection of that inner household, the average inner household in the United States of America, that has lost that moral and ethical fabric, that is out there sending their kids to regular public education, that is working 12, 15 hours a day just to make ends meet, because they've been so distracted from developing that family unit, from developing that community unit. Because I mean, we are tribal people. We need that community, that we've been so pushed out of our element that it's now reflected in this aspect of corruption within our government. And you're right, we have to get back to those community roots. We have to get back to that organic nature of how humanity is meant to live within these communities, and bring that moral and ethical fiber and fabric back into the household, back into the community.
Community so let me just say, offer something to you guys and to your audience, and it's, it was a reality. One of the first places that were, and friends of mine who are pastors were arrested, but one of the first places that they wanted to close down when COVID hit were churches. Why? Because churches are a place where people go to and they can organize, right? If you have a really strong pastor, minister, rabbi, priest, if you got a really strong one, then they can activate their communities in a much different way. They are very, very influential especially if they have a really strong leader, and if people inside of the congregation are also leaders, right? And so keep Walmart open but shut down every church in the neighborhood, right? And to me, that was immediately I saw this. It was a sign of how they were going to basically destroy this country and to take it over. And this is when we talk about like what ideology are we facing, because people throw out all these isms. I mean, it is pure communism. It is communism that has infiltrated into the United States fiber and fabric, inside of the government, and then it permeates its way down, and they have all these plans and aspirations that they have to basically control this country, control the resources, control the people, control the power. And these are not conspiracy theories. These are real things with real people behind them. And I think the American people, the majority of Americans finally came to this realization that something wasn't right. They couldn't quite put their finger on it, but they knew that something wasn't right. And they're looking around for honesty and truth, and trying to use, what Alpha's great word was discernment. And without even knowing that it was discernment that they were applying, and going, where do I find this? Because I'm not getting it here. And, like I can tell you, because I've personally gone after the Pope and some of the things I've written about. I mean, when you start to have priests, Catholic priests being excommunicated, being, having their defrocked, priests and bishops in this country, because they've stood up and said, you can't do this, or you can't do that. I mean, the Pope just recently came out with it's kind of a warning, kind of a, I call it kind of a warning against, to the West, right? About how bad Russia is and how bad Israel is. It's like, what? I mean, how somebody that gets to that level, now that's I call him a dark Pope, but he's a reflection of this globalist shift that is very, very real. And that globalism, it turns into in our country, it turns into a communism with American characteristics. Okay. And it's very real. And this is something that I saw a long time ago, starting to permeate, come into our government. And it's not just, we say the deep state, and it's almost become like the deep state's like saying we have a large debt. Nobody really understands it. We have 30 trillion, and you go deep state, you go, well, what's the deep state? But I do think that we owe it to people more. And this is why I'm going, one of the things I am going to be on the war path to try to achieve is accountability. Okay. Because we must have accountability, because we can throw all these names out and tell all this stuff. But if we don't say, look, it's like, and Alpha, you'd understand this, I think, that to a degree that, a guy selling drugs at the schoolyard, and it's like, okay, so you're out to make a big bust of somebody. And it's not the guy, even though you want to stop that sale of those drugs to those children at the schoolyard, you want to follow that guy back to where he's at. You want to follow him either by his phones, or where he's walking, whose house he goes into, and you find, okay, he's going to this place right here. And then those guys are going to another guy. And then that guy, and it goes on and on and up. And then the more you're working at the detective level and then the undercover level, maybe you've been involved in DEA level operations where, you got the guys on the street and they become your sources, but then you're really looking for the Mexican cartel leader, because these guys are involved in billions of dollars of funding. They're bringing fentanyl into this country now. I mean, it's a multi-billion-dollar industry. So where do you start? Do you get the guy selling the drugs to the children? That's got to stop, right? We got to figure that out. But we also want to tear apart these organizations at the very top. And the other thing, and this is what I don't know if you saw this in your life, but I know that this happens. In fact, I know it's real. This is where I think Tom Homan's going to have this is going to be a tough part of his, and Tom's the right guy, but it's going to be a difficult part of his sort of mission profile. Once you start to dig into the Mexican cartels, let's say, use them as an example, and you start to look at their connections back into this country, right? And you start to look at, okay, well, where's that money going to? And how's that money flowing? What non-governmental organizations, what politicians, right? Who's benefiting from this inside of this country? Because there are people that are benefiting from this. And I think if they look in, if there's a good solid investigation out in Arizona, they're going to find out some big ticket people and a lot of money being exchanged. That's, to me, so we got to stop the low level, but we also got to coordinate. And this from law enforcement. If you're not coordinated between the top and the bottom, you screw things all up, and the case goes to shit, and you have nothing. And the guys that you really want get away. And what we've got to do is we cannot put up with, and this gets to every level. And I'm now talking about accountability. We cannot, look and say, oh, well, that's a U.S. senator, or that's a governor, or that's an attorney general at a state, or that's because they're too big to go after. No, that's what the American people want. The American people want right now, they want some, and I hate to say it like this, but I will. The American people are expecting some scalps here, and again, metaphorically, because people will go crazy with that phrase. But that's what the American people are expecting, and there has to be, because they committed acts of treason. They definitely conspired to overthrow, and undermine a duly elected president of the United States. There's no doubt about it. So that was back in Russiagate. Never mind what they, Jack Smith. Jack Smith should be investigated, and I can tell you there is an investigation ongoing right now in the Department of Justice. I know this because there's a case. It's a very public case, a whistleblower case against Jack Smith. So the fact that Jack Smith just dropped everything, Jack, you're not going to get away with what you just did. And the people that put you in that position, they should not get away with what you just did. It's not about spending $100 million of U.S. taxpayers. It's about putting the country through a rat hole, for the purposes of politically undermining a former president of the United States who was running for president again, and they were threatened by him. Okay.
Yep.
So anyway,
General, that example you used of the school, one, thank you for using that as an example, because you've helped, kind of reaffirm a belief I had and that I would use to teach younger cops. And I said, if you bust that first guy you're talking about, the low ranking guy that's, popping the drugs at the school, I told him, yeah, that's good for you. You get the stat, you get the arrest, the shift sees it. But if your intentions are to save the school, save the community, to make it stop, your investigation has to go farther down, or up in rank, and it's more time consuming and there's more responsibility on you, because the investigation has to be better than the arrest. And then the way you document the investigation has to be better than investigation, because ultimately, if it doesn't lead to a conviction, then it's all for nothing, because they're going to walk. And so when I see this unfolding in our country, I tell everybody, Trump's got 4 more years, but the problems he has to solve, the things he has to fix, the infiltration into our government has to be something that he does it in a fashion that when he leaves in 2028, he's at least put that blocks in place, or maybe even solved the problem, so it's never an issue ever again. And that's a much, more complex thing to look at. And here's the question I have. When after my law enforcement career, and I was doing a gang officer and security for the Palm Springs School District, they realized my gang background. So they presented me with, hey, can you end this gang problem we have in the schools? So I'm a no bullshit guy myself. And I said, listen, are you guys looking for a program to put out in the news so it looks like you're doing something, so, you get elected to the board and all these things again? Or are you really talking about, like, you want to solve this? Because I need to know what level of effort I'm going to put into this. And they said, no, we need this done. Like, parents are just pissed. And so, and there's previous gang programs, the GREAT program and some other ones. And what I looked at was these programs were designed, General, to address a static issue that gangs had at the time. And it would fix it temporarily, but gangs were a living organism. Mm-hmm. So once they realized the way these programs are, they would evolve to it. And hence you got this problem again. So when I started to create this program to deal with it, I realized the thing is this program had to be something that could evolve along with gangs evolving, but sticking to the principles and foundations of this way to address it. And so I would imagine that that's what's playing out in our country. And so for us, on the digital soldier side, the citizen journalists, the anons, all these different people that have these different titles, what we're being, because I imagine that, we're there's these like bumper rails in a bowling alley that, all right, you guys, here you go, but we got to keep you in these lanes because sometimes you just go too far out. How do you see this evolution of the information warfare for us, guys like us that are on the alternative media side? What is it that we need to make sure that we're paying attention to? Because obviously the bad guys have realized these guys dig deep. They put something out within 12 to 16 hours. There's a whole counterintelligence to tell people the truth. How do we maintain being efficient, but also how can we start being proactive instead of reactive from our position, from what you understand?
Yeah, and that's let's talk about the $64,000 question. One of the things that the adversary is very good at is coordinating of their message, the narrative, right? And like I talked about narrative assassination earlier. So they are very effective. They coordinate very well. They tighten that up. They do it on a daily basis. They put it out, and then everybody talks about it. Now that actually has been we've gotten inside of that loop, right? Like, so you guys, myself, the sort of the influencers out there, we know that this is the parrot, this is the mockingbird media, right? So I do think that people are going to have to find, and all of us, like I have a responsibility. I get up every morning. I'm up 3, 4, 5 o'clock in the morning, and I'm on my phone. I'm looking. I'm an information, probably fanatic. And I'm looking for, because I sat yesterday, I got up at 3 o'clock yesterday morning, and I'm watching all of the mainstream news organizations, and I'm watching it for like an hour and a half. I clicked on ABC, CBS, NBC, MSNBC, CNN, Fox, all of them. And I'm listening to them for like 10 minutes. I'm looking for what they're saying, because Then I go to kind of the world that we are operating within, right? This free world of information where it's not controlled like they are, like those media outlets are. And I'm looking for what are the messages? What's trending, right? What's the trending kinds of topics? Who are the people that are the big influencers out there? And obviously, I do go to where, what has Trump recently said? What has Elon recently said? What is somebody like a Joe Rogan? Because they have giant audiences. Alex Jones, these giant audiences. Okay, are they setting a tone and a trend? And I do think that what happens, and this is where the coordination. So you guys operating affiliated together with other like-minded people, but not like-minded to the point of we're all going to be like the Mockingbird media. Hey, I'm going to look at things. You guys have your own great sets of experiences and judgments and abilities and ability to discern and to really look hard at an issue. What we have to constantly fight for is the truth, and you have to report the truth. And it's like I say, I don't, I'll go dig and I'll go look at and I'll go do my own research. I'll look at the facts. I'll make I'll make some assumptions. I'll use my own analysis. But if I say something, it's because that's what I believe. People don't have to believe me. They can go look up what I say. They can go dig into the things that I'm talking about, and they can find out that, yeah, there's, what Flynn said is there's, it's either the truth or there's certainly a lot of elements to what he says that are the truth. And I bring in my own experiences and judgments. So I think it's going to be really hard for us to have that coordinated. And I actually don't want that to happen. What I want us to have is like there's a phrase, and it's actually, Mao, I think, is the one that put it up, and I think it's very effective. Quantity has a quality all of its own. If we are moving as a nation of citizens, and we're moving towards something that we want to achieve, which is a country that we are honored and proud to be, called an American citizen in the Constitution, and we have the constitutional republic, that it's still a viable document. Our founders are still at the essence of who we are as a nation. Josh talked about the breakdown of the family. We've got to work on the rise of the family. We've got to protect children. We've got to look at the future and say, here's the things that we must do. We have to be inspiring. We have to be, we have to provide to people a message of hope. We have to continue to be, like I said about Trump, he provided a voice to the voiceless. We are the voice to the voiceless now, because there's so many millions of Americans out there that turn you guys on and listen to you. And they're like, yeah, that's exactly right, boy. I want those guys to keep pushing that message. And the other thing is something that the other side doesn't do well at all, and they don't care about us. You guys have to connect to your audiences. We have to connect to our audiences. That's why, personally, I'm going to probably do 5 or 6, today, of these kinds of things. And it's not to for all the bullshit that I get hammered over. It's because I want to connect to people. That's why I physically go to places sometimes. That's why I will physically, somebody says, hey, can you come here? Can you come there? And I'll go there. And because I want to hug people. I want to touch people physically, because when they see you physically, they go, oh, he's actually a pretty down to earth guy. It's like, he's like, like him or not, he means what he says. And I do think that physical connection, because we are going to move into a world of artificiality, okay, and now the artificial intelligence component of our lives is going to change rapidly. It already is with children. As much as we don't want kids to be around, the internet. I mean, it's a fact of life. So we have to be conscious of the artificiality of reality that is going to come into our lives here very rapidly, and that's going to affect every single aspect of our lives, particularly our children. And I think that are there some positive things there? Absolutely, there's some positive things. Are there some things that could really hurt us as a society? Absolutely. But I think our responsibility, and now I'm talking to you guys and to your audience, and everybody that will hear this, our responsibility is to constantly say what we believe. And if there's somebody out there that's willing to listen to us, great. Because you guys have increased your audience sizes, and now it's all of us. It's all of these, citizen journalists out there, or citizen, influencers that are out there. I mean, we have all connected to people, and that connection caused Donald J. Trump to get into the victory circle this past election. And now what we have to do is we have to help pick him up and carry him, to the next field, or to the next victory circle. And we're going to have to pick him up, or whoever is after him, because you were just talking about, Alpha. It's not just the here and now, the statistic and the data and the promotion that you get from that. You got your guy. It's about something bigger, and we have to constantly focus on what is bigger than us. And I think that there's those of us. This is how, again, I'm speaking for myself. I believe that there's always something bigger for what we have to achieve in life than what we were handed. I was handed a lot of things by my parents. Love, tough times too. But I was given something, and I want to give back, and I feel obligated and responsible as a soldier, as a guy who served our country, and someone who has been persecuted by our country. I could be vindictive, mean-spirited, hate-filled. I'm not going to be. I'm going to be focused and determined to do my part, to do my job, what I feel like it is. And I don't need somebody to tell me. I don't need to, it's like on a battlefield, right? When you don't know what else is happening all around you, act, move, right? Don't sit there on your laurels and just do nothing, right? Look around and you kind of go, when everybody's going, oh shit, what are we going to do now? Sort of move to the sound of the guns. And yep, that comes with risk. But I think it's all good, because at the end of the day, you feel good about who you are and what you're doing. And I think that that's what matters most, is what you personally feel about yourself, what your family feels about you. And like we talked about, your community, because there are communities out there that respect what it is that those of us that are out here trying to do things to better our country. And that's really, for me, that's what it's all about. So guys, I'm blowing up at 11:30.
We got to wrap it.
Yeah.
No problem, General. General, I appreciate you more than I think that anybody could ever know. You're an amazing human being. I appreciate your patriotism to our country, to this movement, to everything that is going on. Everything that you just said there, I got another hour's worth of conversation to talk about. So what I wanted to do is I'll hit up our friend and we'll get something scheduled, because I wanted to do an X Space with you live, so we can actually have a Q&A with you, me, and Alpha, and we can get that scheduled out. But
let's do that soon. Let's do that very soon, because a lot is going to happen between now and Inauguration Day. I mean, a lot. We're I really believe these people have, they have a strategy, they have a plan.
Yeah.
And so yes, let's do that soon. I like that.
All right.
Real quick before you go, General, because I don't want my audience to lynch me. Because you've made some statements, so people are like, well, but what if Donald Trump at some point in his administration was to offer you a role that was aligned with your thoughts and gave you control of it to help this country out, would you consider it?
Yeah, and again, I'll go back to the analogy that I made about sports. And where I can best be applied. Like I was the captain of my high school football team, okay, and we were state champs. And I went on the field at the beginning of the game, and I never came off the field. And I was blocked a few times. I had to come and take a seat, but I went right back in. But I'm more like a striker on a soccer field, and that's the best way to use Mike Flynn. And President Trump understands that. So
well, it's been an honor, General.
Yeah. So I guess the answer in general is yes, but it's got to be, how can I best be applied to achieve, the outcomes that, in this case, President Donald J. Trump wants to achieve. And at the end of the day, it's, he understands it's always even more than just us. It's who we are as a nation.
Right.
So
Absolutely.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, General Flynn. Appreciate you. Take care. Have a great day. Happy Thanksgiving.
Yeah, absolutely.
See you here soon, sir.
Yep.
Semper
God
Fi,
bless.
General.
Happy Thanksgiving. Semper Fi.
Take care. All right, everybody. Well, there you have it. General Michael T. Flynn. What an amazing conversation. Alpha, I want to get your comments, but let's end the show for everybody out there. Much love, respect, guys. God bless. Take care. Have a great night. I hope you guys enjoyed that. Share, comment, like, and don't forget to subscribe and follow. Thank you so much. Alpha?
Just like, wow. You guys tune in for the next one. Is this
coming?
The energy from that conversation, there was a lot. There's gonna be a lot for us to talk about.
Yep.
Semper Fi.
All right.
Do not try and bend the spoon. That's impossible. Only try to realize the truth.
What truth?
There is no spoon.